Welcome to the Big Success Podcast, cutting-edge conversations on business and personal success, as well as how to level up. Here's your host, #1 business coach in the world, Bradsugars.
All right, you're in for a treat today. Dave Sweet, homicide detective. Yes, his investigations have been on many TV shows from Canada. His first book, he actually put out Skeletons in the Closet, 101 things you can learn from being a homicide detective. And dang, his perspective is different today. Wait till you hear some of the stories of investigations and how they did it. You know, the fact that he says, I'm a salesman, I sold life sentences. How he, in his investigations, would convince people to really, I guess, tell their story. But tied in gangs, organized crime, all that stuff. Dave Sweet is our guest today. Distinguished Service Award, you name it, the guy's done it in investigating and in policing. I can't wait for you to learn his view on success. Here's Dave. So, Dave, with all of the background, how do you define success today?
Well, for me, I guess I measure success wholly around the idea of what kind of impact we're making as people in the lives of people.
Yeah.
And so I believe that what really matters is how we engage with individuals and people that come into contact with our lives. I think if we're doing that, we're living a life that matters and a life that should be counted.
Yeah.
You know, contributions that we're making and serving with people themselves. So I measure success really on impact and what we're doing with people.
So take me back then. As a young man, it probably was a little different. How did your definition of success grow over the years to get to that point?
I mean, I think it's through the service of the community, recognizing that there's need everywhere, and then and just realizing that you have a big part to play and sort of hopefully filling some of those gaps of need, and realizing that the way to do that is going to be coming in with sort of a positive attitude, good mindset every single day. The best thing that I could possibly do is kind of come to work every day with an attitude of gratitude.
So hang on, let me ask though, Dave. Every day you're seeing the worst of the worst. How did you stay positive with that around you?
Oh, because it's a great question. It's a question that's asked all of the time. It's sort of this idea about, how do you deal with dark, terrible things? And, in the time that I worked in a homicide unit for almost 15 years, I was involved in over 600 death investigations. I've seen pretty much all the different ways people can be horrible to one another. But I kept a positive outlook, and I really started with this. None of this was about me. It was always about the person that I was servicing, right? So like if I always remembered that this isn't my tragedy, right? That I could focus on the individual. And then, believe it or not, in even the most heinous of crimes, there are these beautiful silver linings that come out of sort of hope and some positive that can come as a result of even the worst things.
Dang. Well, yeah, there's a great book that's come out of all these years, 25 years of policing and 15 years of dealing with that. Let me go backwards a step, though. In your life, you chose success somewhere. Was it as a young boy, as a young man? Was it when you got into the force? Where did you choose that you were going to be successful no matter what you did?
Well, I was so fortunate, Brad. I was to be born into the family that I was born into.
Yeah.
And so it was really from a very young age that I don't know that I like the idea that we do choose success. I like that as an idea. And I actually believe that we do. However, I will also say that I was gifted a wonderful family of successful people.
Yeah.
My father was a very well-known and well-thought of paleontologist. He was,
Hang on, what's a paleontologist? Give me that one.
Yeah, so he was a fellow that actually he studied more of the fauna versus the dinosaurs.
Got it. Got it.
Essentially. But, around the dinner table at night on a Sunday, we had all these incredible people that would come by to talk and visit and be with my dad. And they were all successful. The guy that believed that dinosaurs were evolved from birds, he showed up. The fellow that found the crater in the Mexico area that believes that that's where the sort of the mass extinction event began. These are people that grace my table. And so to follow success, or the idea of success, it wasn't hard because I was surrounded by successful people.
Yeah.
And so from a very young age, I didn't really ponder anything else. My dad always used to say, if you're going to be a ditch digger, be the best damn ditch digger you can be. And I believe that.
I love it when families give you a level of belief in yourself and a level of belief in success. So over the years, you've developed a lot of formulas, which we're going to go into a bunch of them in the book. But what is in your mind the components of success? Like what makes success happen?
Yeah. So for me, there's a few things. I think first thing is defining what success actually means to you. I think that's the most important part. You have to define what it is actually going to mean to you. And then once that's figured out, surrounding yourself with other successful people is huge because we learn, there was no mystery. A lot of the people that I worked with over the course of my career, we followed each other around. We went to the same areas regularly, and it's because we as a group, as a collective group, knew we were stronger together.
Got it.
And I worked with incredible number of successful, gifted people over my career, but we followed each other all the way through. And that's where that idea of surrounding yourself with successful people. And then I think the next piece is that recognizing that one of the most important things is that you have to set into motion things that are going to cause your lucky breaks a place to land. And so what I mean by that is you can't win the lottery and play, right? And I think successful people put into motion a number of different things that allow those, what we would call lucky breaks, a place to land later. And I have a story about that, actually. It's sort of it's an interesting one, but I'll kind of give you an idea. And so years ago, we were involved in an investigation where a young man had been murdered at a house party, and in the investigation that ensued, we learned that our offender, after the stabbing had occurred, had fled from the residence in a vehicle and had thrown the knife that was used in the stabbing out onto a roadway. And so I live in Canada, Calgary, Alberta. It's snowy here. This event happened in January. We had snow piles up 6 feet along the roadways. And we learned about this knife being thrown somewhere along his route away, a couple days later. But the investigator in that case said, you know what? We need to go out and try and find this knife. And I thought, there's not a chance this is going to happen, right? It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. But yet, he sets into motion the steps that needed to be taken to begin to search the area for this knife. And so I was assigned to go out there and sort of help supervise the search. And so I get out there, and one of the police officers that was there, he had a police van, and he got stuck in our snowbank. And as he's sitting there spinning his tires, and we're all laughing at him because that's what we do. We like to, laugh at somebody else's misfortunes that way when it comes to our own guys. And as he's spinning his tires in this snowbank, wouldn't you believe it, Brad? I'm not joking. That knife came out in 2 parts, the handle and the blade, and landed right at our feet. But that is a perfect example, I think, about what it needs to, put into motion things that are going to cause our lucky breaks to land somewhere.
Yeah. Now, did they get the conviction on that one?
We did get a conviction. Yeah, it was back and forth for many years, but that knife was very, very important. It had both our offender's DNA on it. It had our victim's DNA on it. So it was good. But for me, if we hadn't have done that, we never would have got the knife. If we had looked at the situation and said, oh, the snow's too high, there's not a chance.
Not even worth doing it.
Right. And successful people know that, right? They put into motion, they're going to make themselves successful. And then I think the last piece to being successful for me anyways, when I think about it, and I think about all the people that I've worked around over the years, it's not that hard to be a little bit better than average. I really believe that. So, it's not that hard to, if you're walking to the grocery store one day, everybody else has walked by the little piece of paper that's been sitting on the sidewalk or on the median or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not just to, bend down and pick it up and throw it in the trash as you get to the grocery store, for an example, right? But successful people know it's not hard to be a little bit better than average, and they do that every day.
I've always been intrigued by the relationship of failure and success. And as a homicide detective, failure and success are not too far apart. How do you see the relationship between the two?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is absolutely true. I believe that, failure is part of the evolution towards success. And probably come of no surprise that, when we get involved in some of our investigations, we may have a victim that had been murdered. And then when we sort of start to do their background, realize that there's a number of people that would have likely wanted to have murdered them.
Yeah.
And, you can have a suspect list of 10 or 15 people. And how that sort of applies to us is this: as we go down each rabbit hole and follow each sort of red herring, you might feel like you're not getting any further. But as you start to dwindle that list from, 15 down to 10 and then 10 down to 5, because you're able to clear people through alibi and things of that nature, the case against your number one suspect just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, right? Because he's the one person you can't clear. So that's sort of how I sort of view sort of the evolution of success and failure. Yeah.
You're on the Big Success Podcast. We're going to be back. Dave and I are going to start diving into a lot of the cases and what we learn from the cases. But if come back with us in a moment, make sure you hit that subscribe button and we'll get on to more success.
Business empires are where most people create the vast majority of their initial income and wealth. Through Brad Sugars' Entrepreneurs event, you will learn how to turn your companies into valuable and sellable assets. Visit bradsugars.com to attend this program as a standalone or as part of Brad Sugars' Entrepreneurial University.
All right, so Dave, 15 years homicide, 25 years policing. How are the skills of homicide detectives relatable, I guess, into normal everyday life? I mean, when I read through the book, 101 Life Lessons, I think that it's pretty amazing how some of these things you've translated. How do you see that as being relatable?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll give you an example. One of the things that I came to learn was when it comes to interviewing or interrogating, a lot of your listeners, people that are out there right now, are in sales positions. They're selling houses, they're selling cars, or stocks, or these, or what have you. And what I ended up doing is I sold life sentences.
I sold life sentences. I'm going to name the podcast that. I sold life sentences.
Well, and I really truly did. I really feel like I did, because what ended up happening, and where it's relatable is that unbelievably, when you kind of look at what an interview process is like, for an example, a lot of the strategies and the techniques that we use in an interview to convince or have somebody accept that by talking to us, that is actually a good thing, right? And it gives them an opportunity to tell their side of the story and all those kinds of things. But it comes at a great cost.
Yeah.
The cost is they're going to go to jail for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
But many people do it.
Yeah.
And how that happens is very similar to the way it happens, like if you were to walk in and trying to buy a car. A lot of the same kinds of things are occurring in an interview as they are in a sales room floor. So, for example, there's going to be a period of time where there's some rapport building, right? Starting to understand and get what people's interests are. There's going to be some theme building that goes on top of that. In an interview setting, for example, one of the things that I always think of, and when I do workshops on this, I always remind people, you need to just listen, because if you listen, you'll hear what a person is concerned about or what they fear. They give it to you. Not that long ago, I was talking to a kid, and he really was a kid. And his whole entire question was not whether or not he did the murder. He was worried about whether he was going to have a cell by himself, and what it would be like inside of jail. What he's really telling me is that he's scared. He's scared he's scared to get hurt and all of these kinds of things. And so as an interviewer, when I hear that, I need to address that in some way, shape, or form and reframe that his perspective of what jail is. Right?
Yeah.
And so it might be, well, in this particular case, it was just reminding him that jail's a great place for a timeout. It's a place where we need to go, and we know that we won't,
Yeah, I need a 30-year timeout.
but it for them, it makes sense in the moment, right? And, no different than in a sales situation. You need to know when you can push, when you can pressure, when you need to lay off a little bit. If you're going to close it, it is all about sort of the way you kind of move through some of the strategies in an interview room, practicing empathy versus sympathy, all of these kinds of things. And I spent quite a bit of time, again, talking about this, but you see the relatability between the two skills.
Yeah.
The only difference, I'm selling somebody on the idea that it's their opportunity to tell their story, and somebody else would be selling, like I said, car, house, or what have you.
Yeah. So you talk about the bogeyman type thing, that idea of fear and people facing their fears. Yeah. Tell me more about that and success, because I think that's a really important aspect of getting to be successful.
Yeah, totally. I mean, fear is sort of it's really it's almost like a three-headed monster to me. Some of it is we have these fears that we learn. Actually, it's interesting when it comes to fear, experts have suggested that we're born with only two fears: fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. So every other fear that we have in life has been learned in some way, shape, or form. And when we come to acknowledge that, then we can, if we learn, we can hopefully unlearn it in some way, shape, or form as well. And so one of my jobs always as an investigator is to hear somebody's fear and then help them try and overcome it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, this is worried they're going to get beat up or they're going to be killed because they're a witness to a crime. Right? It's my job to explain to them why I don't believe that will happen. Right?
Dave, I watch a lot of crime shows, and I always think, how that guy's just got to be stupid. Why didn't he? I didn't realize just how much you, as the investigator, are selling them. Dang, I never really thought of it that way.
You're selling it, and there's a little parrot on their shoulder going, "Don't buy it, don't buy it, don't buy it." That would be the lawyer, right? But they still buy, and it is a fascinating relationship. But I really do believe that it is, the things that I learned in a interview room are so universal to the larger, the bigger piece. And that's why, I so much enjoy talking to people about business leaders and people like that.
Yeah.
I talk about the strategies because I think they take away a lot from that discussion.
Yeah. So let's dive into, you discuss in the book a lot about cause and effect, and you talk about the jury and you had to explain that to a jury one time. Tell us more about cause and effect and why that's an important lesson.
Well, I think cause and effect is something that's really important because a lot of us never think kind of 3 steps ahead of what our action is going to be, right? Like when we put this into motion, what is that going to look like 3 steps down the road? We can usually anticipate what's going to look like immediately, but what is it going to look 2 or 3 steps down the road? If you're not considering that, you may not put the same action into place. For example, like I'll give you one. I believe in creating win-win situations all of the time, myself. So I don't like to lose. Like nobody likes to lose, but I accept that sometimes you do, and that sort of acceptance of failure is part of the evolution to success. But I try to create win-win situations. So go back to the interview, for example. When I walk into an interview room and there's a guy who's already sitting there, he's been arrested for murder, and he's sitting in my chair, right? My comfy, fancy chair. Am I going to ask him to move into his chair, or am I just going to accept that happened, right? I would never fight somebody over a chair, because if I said to the guy, move into the other chair, and he says no, what am I really going to do? Dump him out of the chair? It would not look good. It wouldn't be right. And I would lose that whole entire thing. So knowing that is going to occur, and I could get into a fight that I'm not going to be able to win, I end up sitting in his chair and continuing the interview right from the very beginning. For example, right? And the relationship of cause and effect, though, overall is we rely on as police officers all the time. You give sort of a certain stimulus in one instance, and you see kind of how it falls out further down the road. One of the talked about in the book was the CSI, and that's that whole idea that what we see on crime shows, it could actually happen in real life. And what that is doing is it is training and educating members of the public that sit on juries of unrealistic expectations when it comes to investigation itself. Like, why couldn't you get the license plate number of the vehicles screaming away? I saw it on a CSI episode.
Yeah, I think if I watch CSI episodes, I'm like, there's no way I'm ever going to commit a crime because they can find my DNA on any damn thing. It's like, I think it's educated people to not do it. Let's go to your inner Jedi then, because I think that's another interesting aspect of what you look at.
Yeah, I really like this idea of, unleashing your inner Jedi. And what I believe is that we're all influenced by these, social norms that we're expected to do. And once you understand what those are, you're more able to use them as a way of sort of persuading people into coming along on the ride with you, right? And it helps you influence more positive outcomes in your own life. So a lot of what Unleashing the Inner Jedi is about is a lot has to do with what Robert Cialdini originally spoke on when it comes to persuasion and the power of it. But there are a number of things that we are persuaded by or used to persuade us. Scarcity is the salesman's secret weapon, right? If you don't put down payment on this lot today, there was 3 other people that were coming by to look at it later. So what do? You put the down payment on the lot. Why? Because you feel compelled that you need to do this now. The deal's only going to last a certain period of time, and then it's going to be gone, right?
Yeah.
That's why people have limited time offers, all of these things kind of based around this idea of scarce. And so if you want to pressurize somebody, you create scarcity in the way you use your language, whatever that would be, right? In an interview room, for example, where I'm talking to a bad guy, it would be along the idea that today's your day. You're not going to get another day to explain what happened or to give your side of the story, those kinds of things. But yeah, once you understand persuasion and some of the influencers, likability, reciprocity, this sort of idea of conformity or groupthink, there's a variety of them, but they all behave in a way that actually changes the way we behave in different ways. And you can see it plays out in all sorts of our lives. A really benign example, if you go to the mall later today and somebody opens the door for you as you're walking in the mall, I know you're going to get clumsy and all out of sorts, but you're going to jump forward to open the door for them if it's
on
a
the second
vestibule.
door. Yeah.
You know, you just do it. And why do you do it? Because we don't like the feeling of owing something to somebody else. This year I was giving out just a few Christmas gifts to different people, just something small, little bottle of wine or what have you. I went to one house and I gave them the bottle of wine, and you knew that they didn't have anything for you, but they had actually 5 or 6 presents stacked up right by the tree with a card on it. And they said, here you go. And it was a box of chocolates, right? But it's because they don't like that feeling of owing something or receiving a gift that they can't reciprocate back. So they actually go out and buy 5 or 6 boxes of chocolates and just leave them at the door for anybody that does show up like me to give them a bottle of wine.
Got it.
Right?
Got it.
It's funny. Yeah.
You're on the Big Success Podcast. We're going to be back in just a moment. We're going to dive into a couple of specific cases and the lessons that Dave took from them. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We'll be back.
With 25 years of policing experience, Detective Dave Sweet has investigated some of Canada's most heinous crimes. In 2023, Stark Publishing launched Dave's first book, Skeletons in My Closet, 101 Life Lessons from a Homicide Detective. To learn more about Dave Sweet, please visit unconventionalclassroom.ca.
We're back. Dave, I gotta ask, first of all, I do love the fact that it's Dave Sweet and Brad Sugars on this podcast. That's kind of a very cool thing. And you know, although your career was definitely a lot more fun stories. There's one particular case. Well, let's go back. Longest case to get a conviction. How many years was one of the longest ones?
Oh, probably 3 years.
How do you stay patient or persistent, or how do you just keep going with that? What's your theory on that?
Well, there's really you don't have an option not to be patient. You know, it's just what. Yeah. So the one that I'm thinking of was a young man that was he was murdered on Christmas Eve, I think of 2015, and we were made arrests, I believe, in 2018. But he had been murdered. It was he had been involved and caught up in the darker side of life, lived it on the fringes, and he was robbed some money and drugs. What happened? And then he was killed and left in a vehicle. And for months, actually, I was going through that process of going down these different rabbit holes and following these different red herrings. It was kind of working out. And then eventually we got a favorable crime lab finding that came in that sort of pointed me in the direction where my suspects would be. And so over the course of the next several years, we had to construct. This is something we do in Canada that's different than in the U.S., but we constructed a whole world of around him of undercover police officers, and it over time they built up a relationship, and he ended up eventually confessing to the crime to them. But it just took a lot of time and patience all the way through that. And although it might be difficult for me, think about the family. The families in this situation, they are also having to be incredibly patient. When I think of family and patience, I think of the families out there that never, ever get an arrest in their case. In Calgary, we solve about 85% of our homicides. That sounds pretty good, but that means that 2 in 10 families, or about 2 in 10 families, don't ever get answers.
Yeah.
There are cases out there where we have found bones, for example. There's just not enough evidence to ever suggest how this person died in the first place. Imagine the mystery kind of is around those families.
Yeah.
How patient they have to be waiting for an outcome.
Yeah. Now, it's a weird way to look at it, but there's part of what you focus in on the book is it's almost goal setting, but like solving the puzzle. You keep going because you have a goal of actually deciding this thing. Does that make it easier or harder? What's your perspective on that? You've got to solve this thing.
I mean, the goal is obviously always want to bring resolution to the family.
Yeah.
And it is actually true. Like, the thing that motivates us, it's not a boss that's coming down and screaming down your throat going, you need to solve this case, right? It's this internal thing that's just in part of you that says you need to do this. But I have to tell you, Brad, there's no better feeling in the world than to call a family after years of them waiting for an answer to be able to provide them that answer over a phone or having them come down to the office and you sitting down with them and talking to them.
Yeah.
That's what every investigator waits for and lives for, is that opportunity to kind of give them some answers to a lot of the questions they didn't have prior. And so that is actually the very motivating force, at least it was for me, when it came to investigating crimes.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, though, and one of the things you allude to is actually having the goal or knowing with absolute clarity, this is the goal. I need to find a solution for this, and the motivation behind it is one thing. But I think that, if I look at what you teach, people aren't clear enough on their goals, I think is probably the point you've made. How do you help people get even clearer on their goals? I mean, for you, it was obvious. This guy got killed. We got to find someone that did it type thing. How do you help people get much clearer on their goals?
Well, I mean, it's always reminding ourselves of our purpose. There's this really great, it goes back to ancient times. I think it was Aristotle. He came up with this idea of a personal ethos. I don't know if you've ever heard of an ethos, but it's pen to paper, writing it all out. What is your purpose, right? And if you have a clear vision of what your purpose is, then achieving goals becomes so much clearer and easier to do, and things can be overcome. Like, one of my purposes, and it's a very simple personal ethos that I have, it's love people. If I remember to love people, even the bad people, that's what allows me to build connection in an interview room.
Yeah.
That is what allows me to deal with a family. That is what allows me and drives me to be a servant to my community, is this whole idea of being people. And it's a very, very simple ethos, but it's what my purpose is. And so when I talk about resiliency and how to become adaptable or remain adaptable, things of that nature, what I'm asked people to consider is writing out what their purpose is.
Yeah.
And then it can change over time, but it is a really good way of kind of coming back and leveling what you're doing.
Yeah.
A good way of keeping you thinking forward.
Yeah. Yeah. When Kevin first connected us and I read that about you, that your ethos is to love people, I'm like, I'm not sure I would be that strong. Last question for the homicide side of things. How did you keep your life and the homicide life separated? Because every TV show I've ever seen, the homicide detective is messed up and crazy because of that. How did you do that? How did you keep that balance, I guess, in your world?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I've had a few scrapes and some bumps and bruises along the way, of course. But I was able to, I mean, you always thought about the cases that you were working on. They came home with you regularly. But no, I had enjoyment out hobbies outside of work that didn't involve policing and that kind of thing. One of my escapes always was coaching. I had the opportunity to coach my son hockey for years, and that was just sort of, they just got you away from the office.
Yeah.
But it was such a weird dichotomy because, I could be at the autopsy of a young person that morning, and that evening having a birthday party or celebrating a birthday or going to a hockey game or what have you. It was such a weird, there was just constant these trends, but for whatever reason, I was able to kind of move through them relatively flawlessly. And some people would say it's because of our ability, or at least my ability, to compartmentalize. So I was able to story off the really terrible things that happened sort of through the course of the day and fill those terrible things in with sort of positive things. And that's how I maintained it. ways.
Dave, final question. What's the best advice you ever got or the best quote you ever read on the subject of success?
Yeah, so actually, I thought long and hard about it, and I have to go back to my roots as a kid born in 73. Do or do not, there is no try.
Yoda.
And that's Master Yoda from Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
But I think that is a really good way of summarizing sort of how I view success, and as I've always viewed it. Yeah.
This is the Big Success Podcast. I'm Brad Sugars, your host. Make sure you're back with us next week for more on success. Make sure you follow Dave. Learn, keep reading, keep studying, and success will come to you. Oh, and hit that subscribe button. And that's the Big Success Podcast for today. Hopefully you took a lot of notes, learned a whole bunch, and if you need to, go re-listen to it. We dropped a lot of information right there today. Big success is what it's all about. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button so you're here with us every single week on the Big Success Podcast. I'm Brad Sugars. That's BS. Big success is what we're shooting for. Check the show notes for all the links. Make sure you follow through. Keep learning. Keep coming back. Oh, and by the way, share this with any of your friends who you know are up for success. I'll see you next week on the Big Success Podcast.
You've been listening to the Big Success Podcast with the #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars. To learn more about how to achieve business and personal success, as well as how to level up or listen to past episodes, visit www.bradsugars.com.